Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Neurodiverse Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Eccleston, aka the Neurodiverse Teacher, and today my guest is Meagan Beam. Meagan is an experienced classroom educator and holds associate certifications. Whoa, couldn't say that there. Through Orton Gillingham Academy. She majored in multi-categorical special education K-12 at Clemson University and completed her Master's of Reading with an elementary focus through Grand Canyon University. Meagan is the CEO and creator of Otter Reading, an innovative multi-sensory resource tool designed for a multi-sensory approach to literacy. So welcome, Meagan, to the Neurodiverse Teacher Podcast. And I'm sorry I can't speak, apparently.
Oh, you're good. Hi, thank you for having me.
I am really excited to have you. And what I didn't mention, too, in my introduction to everyone is I have the pleasure of knowing you through our wonderful experience that I've talked about before on this podcast of being on The Blocks, which is Wes Bergman's television show for entrepreneurs. So you had a really cool experience, and I think you have a release date coming up from the show that you were on.
Yes, it was an amazing experience because I got to meet Kristen and she let me follow her around the whole week.
Always. I'm pretty sure I was following you around, so.
Oh, negative.
No, I was definitely, you were my safe space during that experience. So I'm very appreciative to you.
And you as well. Yes, I think it released today. Hopefully full release at least by tomorrow.
Yes. So really everyone listening needs to check it out. Check out Meagan. And before you do, here's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about her. So I'm going to jump right into some questions, Meagan, for you. And the first one being is, tell me your backstory about who you are, how you got into education, and ultimately what led you to creating Otter Reading.
So I grew up, both of my parents were educators. My mom still is. My dad now is in a different realm, but still loves to be a mentor and that sort of thing to others. And from an early age, that's what I wanted to be. I played school and did all of that. I loved to read. But reading was something that never really came easy. It was something I definitely had to work on and spend a whole lot of extra time studying and all of that. So I went in to high school and spent over 1,000 hours in the self-contained special education class and just fell in love with the classroom. The teachers were like my second moms because they let me use their room as a locker and just supported me. And if I ever had a rough day, I knew I could come in there and just take a second to gather myself and go back. So that led me to major in special ed at Clemson and then just went on into teaching. And then about 14 years later, I was leading a session on multi-sensory instruction. And at the same time, I was teaching the change the Y to I rule. And I was like, I wish that there was a way to take the Y off and put the I on and then add the vowel suffix. And that's sort of where my tool came about. I went to Lowe's, grabbed some PVC pipe and some couplings and started cutting pipe and all of that. And now I'm sort of led to where I am today.
That is amazing. So is there a place to, now your tools in production, right? Like people can go and get your tools, especially if they have children who are struggling readers, right?
Yes. So it is on my Etsy page at and my shop is Otter Reading, and I am slowly getting on Amazon, which I'm really excited about, but Amazon's a full-on process. So right now I have everything on my Etsy page, and I just got it manufactured. It is no longer PVC pipe. I got it manufactured last summer. So now it just makes the process a lot quicker and more efficient for me too, which is really nice. No more cutting PVC pipe into 2-inch pieces.
I imagine that's probably something that you are very happy about.
Celebrating. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, I also wanted to point out on this show, a lot of what the show is based on is really trying to get a lot of younger adults to recognize that we all face challenges, and those challenges don't have to hold us back from being successful. So, in addition to some of the stuff that you shared, if you're okay with me sharing this, you also have health things that you constantly are battling over that you are not allowing to hold you back, correct?
Yes. So I am a type 1 diabetic, and I also have fibromyalgia. Both were diagnosed later in life. I like to say that I got a kid disease as an educator teaching children. So, it's something that I've just kind of rolled with. I've never been one to just let something keep me down, or I'm usually, the glass is usually way full. So I just kind of take that in stride and just use it as a way to love on others and be an encouragement to others who are in the same spot as me. But yeah, it's been a journey, even at the blocks. Kristen, you saved me, because I'd realized that my insulin had fell out of my suitcase, and I don't think anybody else knows this. So other blocks, if they're listening, yeah, I escaped to Walgreens to get my insulin and come back.
No, I remember that. And that was actually something I was going to point out. So first, thank you for being open about it, because I think it's important for other people to recognize that, there are people out there who are struggling with all sorts of different things, and they don't let it hold them back. And you were right. I remember, I feel like I learned so much, and I was so like in awe of you, because you had stuff going on with your insulin. We had some really long days when we were shooting that show too. And you had to be very regimented about when you ate, when you had access to things. And that was not always super convenient given our shooting schedule, but you never once complained. You never once let it hold you back. You always had a plan. You always had a plan of action. You took whatever you needed to do. And I think when you went to Walmart or whatever, that I didn't even know that you had gone. And I followed you around like a lost puppy the whole time we were there. So, I mean, you really didn't let this be this hurdle that held you back, or any kind of excuse of like, oh, I can't because of this or that, that's what held me back in any kind of way. Like you own who you are, and you don't let it stop you from doing really amazing things. And I really love that about you, just so you know.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I have always been taught from an early age, like, failure is not failure. You just learn from it. And it's always kind of been that way. It's like a learning opportunity. For example, I put PVC pipe in the dishwasher because I was like, that's going to save me from having to clean. And did you know PVC pipe, I can't remember, I guess it expands. I don't know. Now I don't remember, conveniently pushed it on my brain, but it messes it up in the dishwasher. And I was like, well, okay, next. So like,
I wouldn't have known that. I would have figured it's a pipe, right? That like water,
right?
no big deal.
No big deal.
Don't feel bad. I would have made the same mistake on that one. So you wouldn't have been alone.
So yeah. So I was like, okay.
One of the other things we connected about a lot. Yeah. And one of the things we connected about a lot while we were together was the concept of ADHD. I'm very open and honest all the time that I have ADHD. You and I talked about ADHD a lot. ADHD came out a lot because of what I do while I was on the blocks. But I really enjoyed having that conversation with you. And hopefully, I'm going to give a spoiler alert to people who listen to both this podcast and then to Neurodiverse Moms, because you're going to be a guest host for us in a couple of weeks. And I'm excited because I felt like we had a lot of really great conversations while we were away at the blocks about being moms who are probably dealing with ADHD and how that impacts us and our ability to just mom and be entrepreneurs and just be successful functioning people on a day-to-day basis. And I thought it might be a great opportunity for us today to talk a little bit more about that and some of the things that we face, especially in relation to trying to be successful with having needs. And it can be anywhere from ADHD to being a diabetic that hold us back and trying to accomplish the things that we want to.
Yeah, like I remember having so many conversations about that and our brains going 100 miles an hour and like how are we going to get through this week when we have so much information coming at us, so many people to talk to, keeping track of conversations, names and all, like, and then connecting over supporting kids who have had it and giving them resources and loving on their families and all of that. Like I love, it's so up my alley. They're like my favorite kids, the ones that can't sit still and wiggle their butts in their seat all day. Like, give me a classroom album, because that's me too. Like, I'm wiggling too, or at least my brain is. I'm not as active, but my brain just does not stop.
And how many people did we meet too while we were on the blocks who were like, I think I have, after I like would get up and talk about 88, like they're like, I think I have it too. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much everybody here in this room does. And it was because it was a room full of entrepreneurs who had ideas and who were creative. And I think almost everybody had some level of story of something they had to overcome or something that was challenging for them, or oh my gosh, I never realized that this was what was going on. And so a lot of our really creative people, and you are, I would have put into the category of being a creative person. I mean, you've come up with a multi-sensory tool using PVC piping for how to address literacy needs. So, but I mean, very creative people are people who typically are neurodiverse individuals. And I think it's a good sign of showing, in school, we don't always allow students to have opportunities to really display their strengths.
Right. Like, and even setting them up to think outside of the box. And that's okay. Like, just giving them opportunities to not have it be a pencil paper response or things like that. And I feel like, as like in education, we're getting away from that. And so then you have all of us with ADHD going into adulthood that's like, okay, my brain does not stop. I'm going to be an entrepreneur and do what I want to do and throw my creativity in that way, and gives us the freedom to just sprint as fast as we want to sprint, which is usually very fast.
Yes. You and I were even talking about how we have like a million things and just not enough time. And
Yes.
and let me ask you too, what does that transition look like for you as somebody who was a full-time teacher in the classroom to trying to establish your own business? What kind of transition has that looked like for you?
So it's definitely been interesting because I knew nothing of the quote unquote business world, so to speak. So that was a learning curve. I read Donald Miller has a couple of books out and basically like used all of his books to kind of help guide and like the marketing and the business side. And then it was just trial by fire. And then now I work from home and for an amazing reading curriculum company that I love, but it is so different than the classroom. Like, it's so quiet and my brain is just like not used to quiet and still and peace. Like, it's very different.
100%.
But it's been so good to be in an environment, even in my full-time job, that's in the same space as where my tool is, because I just keep getting to learn more and grow. And I know we even talked about like getting doctorates because you have yours. And so like me starting that process and what does that look like? And so, because, we can never be bored. So
Yeah. Yes, that's my kryptonite, right? Any moment of boredom, I'm like, oh, what else can I put on my plate? Not realizing that I already have a full plate, and this is a lull moment, and I should just appreciate the moment. I don't know if you run into that. I run into that.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, okay, obviously I'm not doing something. And I'm like, we were even talking about like, if we feel bored or are we lazy? I'm like, no, like it's just stop. Like, that's okay.
But I think that stems a lot. I was reading something that lazy feeling is this trauma response that so many people with ADHD have, because so many of us got the message when we were younger that like, if you weren't so lazy, you could do this. Or you just tried a little bit harder, you could make it happen. And so many of us got that very familiar message. And I'm seeing you shake your head. And most people, when I say that, shake their head because we all got some version of that message. And then now that we're adults, we equate our productivity to making sure that we're doing something, we're not being lazy. So the moment that we finally go, okay, I can take a breath, we're like, people are going to think we're lazy. I got to do something. I got to find something to do, because it's almost this trauma response that got built into us that people made us feel when we were younger.
Oh, absolutely. And even like in the literacy field, teachers will say that sometimes to students with dyslexia or who are struggling readers, that are like, look, you just are being lazy. You know these sounds, you know what that says. Just try harder. And these poor kids are like, I'm lost. And there's so much science that says phonics and other pieces of the science of reading are so good, instead of using something like the 3 cueing system, where they're literally looking at the picture, the word or the first letter in the word, and the context around the word to guess what that word is. And that is not sustainable or doable. And then they're like, well, just now you can memorize these words too. Well, our brain isn't set up that way. So it can't hold hundreds and thousands of words. So it just, like, these poor kids, they know, and they know that their confidence, their self-esteem is all wrapped up into this. And it is not a try harder. It is a give me something else approach that these kids need.
How much do you think, too, from like an educator standpoint, it's like this vicious cycle? Because I feel like oftentimes as teachers, you end up feeling pressured to have results. Like it's your job to get results from kids, and then within a certain time period too, right? Like that's the other critical factor to this. It's like you need to have this result by this time frame, because we have to move on to this thing, because you have to have this result by this time frame. So what degree do you think that teachers get that message? And I guess, that I know for a fact that that's stressful in itself. And then these negative messages come out to kids, and it just ends up creating this like compounded vicious cycle type of scenario.
Oh, absolutely. It's insanity, basically. And on top of that, it's with this curriculum that we're giving you. So not only is the teacher not able to meet the individual needs of the students because they are time crunched, but they have to use a set curriculum that is probably not going to meet all the needs, and the majority of it's coming down from up high. So there's no guarantee it's even research based. And that's honestly where the reading world is right now. And the money and all of that has been made from some of these huge curriculums that are not necessarily research based. And it's left behind a wake of 32 million children who are not reading on grade level. And there's like 50-something% of adults in the US who are functionally illiterate. Like there's an issue, and it definitely is something that I'm super passionate about, like wanting to hit head on and supporting these kids and making them feel successful, some of them for the very first time.
No, absolutely. And what some readers, I'm doing great, some listeners who are not necessarily in the education realm, what you might not be aware of, and of course I'm drawing a blank, Meagan, if you know the name of it, please feel free to chime in on it. But there was like this big awakening at the beginning of this school year that one of the major reading, like this is how you do it, this is how you teach kids to read, and it had been like the standard rule for so long. Even that author came out and was like, yeah, I actually don't think that this is the way that we should be going. And it seemed to hit the reading world hard, because it's like that was the golden standard of how you taught kids to read. And now the person who created it is even going, no.
That was Lucy Calkins' materials, and that was good. But that had come as a result of brain research, and then teachers stepping up and saying, no, I want to follow the brain research and teach phonics and other pieces of the science of reading, because obviously kids could decode all day, but if they're not understanding what they're decoding, they're not reading either. So we know it's phonics and comprehension piece, but that's, there's a podcast called Sold a Story that Emily Hanford did, and that's what kind of fired up some of the people in the reading world that kind of needed to kind of take a step back and look at, okay, are we really and truly doing this for the kids, or are there other things that are ulterior motives?
100%, because I think oftentimes, right, we get stuff handed down from, as you said, higher up. And sometimes I think, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I have definitely experienced this. Change is probably one of the hardest things to make happen, which should be clear, right? The fact that we're using a 200-year-old operating system still for what education looks like, but trying to get any kind of change, even with all the research that we have now about how the brain learns best and what are best practices for kids, for teachers. But even with that information, we tend not to integrate it. And I don't know if it's because teachers are just overwhelmed and the idea of having to change things up or integrate anything new is just like the last thing on anyone's mind because they're so overwhelmed, or it's the fact that we're constantly getting bombarded with things that people don't know what to believe in. I don't know if you ever came across this, but we would constantly have something rolled out that was like, I felt like a half-baked idea. And then because it failed, because it was a half-baked idea and somebody wanted to get something out quickly because it was failing, they just rolled out another half-baked idea.
Oh, absolutely. And without any training, teachers are thrown some sort of curriculum, no training on how to implement it properly. 100%. And like, I've been hearing that schools are going down to 4 days now, and it's not anything. I mean, it obviously will benefit teachers because it'll give them time to actually plan and get ahead and make education strong and more individualistic for these kids. But it's a budget thing. And so when you act on all of these halfway, half-baked ideas, that's just more money that's lost on curriculum. And I think that's part of it too, is they're like, we just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this curriculum. We can't afford to go buy more. So you get one book, you pass it around your grade. Well, those of us who are in education know that that is not possible. Like, that never happens. We all taught reading usually in the morning because we know that's when their brains are fresh and ready to tackle something like that. So it just, sharing is caring, but it's hard.
I feel like I invited you on. I wanted to share all these things about you now, and I've turned it into what is wrong with the education system podcast.
Hey, I'm here for it. Let's solve it. Let's do it.
It's not often that I get another teacher on here. So when I do, I love the opportunity to speak about these things. One, so two, even if you're listening and you're not a teacher, I think oftentimes parents are not aware of where some of the hiccup in the funnel essentially is, and they automatically go, what are these teachers doing? Why aren't these teachers doing things? And I want people to realize most of the time it's not teachers. Most of the time you have teachers who are probably in agreement with you, but they're very, very stuck on the fact that they can't do anything. These messages come down from higher up, and it's kind of like, make it work or you're out the door kind of situation. And people are stuck with, okay, and almost kind of put into these pigeonholed, like, it's definitely a profession, right, where you are the expert, but you are not treated like you are the expert of your field.
100%. Yeah. And you're exactly right. Like, these parents, all they see is the teacher, but what they don't know is that the teacher doesn't follow the curriculum and their schedule and all of that. They're going to get evaluated on that. And it very easily, and happens all the time, that ends up in their file. And so, like, teachers are saying, well, I have families and kids and I can't afford to lose my job. So I know that this may not be best, but I'm going to just do the very best that I can for the students that are in front of me. but I'm going to do all I can to avoid getting caught or in trouble because they know the consequences.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a setup. And I promise I'm gonna get us back on track and we're gonna get back to more on Otter Reading. But why I have you, I want to ask you one more kind of teachery tangent off of an article I read today that I thought was really interesting. And this was an educational weekly article, and it talked about this concept that a lot of people I think are aware of, that kids are starting to show more disrespect in the classroom and disciplinary issues in the classroom than they had in the past. And I was reading the article, and it had a statement along the lines where like 90% of parents recognize that it is their job essentially to ensure that the character development of their child is on track. And I was like, okay, good to hear that at least 90% of
Yes.
parents. But then it said 69% of parents expect teachers to essentially reinforce their character development expectations while in the school setting. And why I'm bringing this up, because I wanted to ask you, is I started to really go down a rabbit hole in my mind. So I wanted to get your perspective on this because, back generations ago, right, it wasn't uncommon to get in a lot of trouble at school. They used to even have like the paddle. And by no means am I saying like, let's bring that back. That is not what I'm saying. But like, there was discipline that happened at school, and you always heard this concept. And even when I was growing up, like if you got in trouble at school, you were going to get even worse trouble at home. Like your
100%.
parents backed the teachers 100% in whatever it was. But I feel like there's been this huge dynamic shift, right? With a couple of things. One, at least in the area that I taught in, and I'm assuming this is probably happening nationwide, disciplinary actions have significantly changed, almost to the point where there is no recourse for teachers when something happens. And the second being is, most of the time, if you end up calling a parent saying, hey, your kid did X, Y, and Z, it's usually met with a response of, well, what did you do to make my child feel a certain way? And I'm not saying there aren't teachers out there, because there are teachers out there. Like, I'm not sure why you decided education was the field that you wanted to be in. So I'm not taking up for that aspect. It definitely exists. But I also feel like if parents are expecting teachers to essentially follow through on these things, I feel like teachers have these handcuffs on now, because it's like, I can't, there are no disciplinary measures for me to take. And two, I have no idea what you are teaching at home. So it's like, if you don't trust me enough to let me at least be like, this is the expectation that I'm setting, at least in my classroom, I don't know that then there's a disconnect there, because how are you going to have teachers follow through on that if you're going to then call them and yell at them for how they handled it? So I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on this, because I felt like my brain went all over the place when I was hearing this.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, like, if the teachers say so and so, look, okay, that's like, I've given you 100 strikes, because we also know teachers give more grace than any other human being on the face of the earth, because we like truly love what we do, and we love these babies so hard. But we know that if we send them to the principal, they're going to be skipping back in with a bag of Doritos and a lollipop. Like, and so we know that honestly, it's easier just to keep them in the classroom, because then you're not trying to address two different behaviors, because they're coming in going, look, you want to go there too, so that it. And then and you're so right, we call parents, and sometimes they back us, and sometimes it's like, well, tell me what you did first before I listen to, and you're just like, no, like, the kids need to take responsibility. And I mean, just look at what happened with Abby, with that the teacher who just got shot by her student, 6.
Yeah.
And I responded to, because there was comments that that parents and others were making on TikTok, and it made me cry. Like, it fired me up. And I usually don't respond, because I know that it's social media, but I was like, no, this is not okay. And they were basically like, I will wait to make a decision on how I feel about this situation until I know what the teacher did to make the child act, and even more disgusting comments. Like when I say, like, it still like makes me want to cry because it like breaks my heart so bad and burns me up so bad. I mean, it just is like, no, I don't care if she pummeled the kid, which I know, and I guarantee you no teacher would ever do that to a child. She still didn't deserve to be shot. Like, that just, like, it just blows my mind because there is nothing in this world that any teacher would ever imaginably do to a child that would warrant that sort of consequence. Like,
but isn't it funny how they put more on the teacher than how did this child get access to or bring to school or the parent? Do you know what I mean? What was happening at home? Like, it was all put on the teacher and what the teacher's actions were versus what was happening at home that led to this child even having access to this. And I'll say, Meagan, too, like, as somebody who specializes in mental health in an education setting, I know that there are teachers who are not always the best equipped to deal with certain students with certain needs. There's always a root cause to every child's behavior. And some teachers just don't have the training and knowledge to understand that don't get in a power struggle, don't engage it in this certain situation. Like, there's certain ways to handle it. And some people don't have that knowledge and skill set, but it does not equate to, but you deserve to get shot for the way you handled it. Maybe you need to have a conversation with your principal, administration, you need more training, but it doesn't equate to you deserve to have been shot.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I love how you say, like, figuring out, because I loved figuring out, okay, what was the antecedent when they did this? So what do we, like, it was like a puzzle to me because I knew that was going to make the relationship that I had with a child better, but they were also going to be more successful. So for me, the joy of, like, okay, what can we do to best address and support this kid? So yeah, absolutely.
100%. 100%. And like I said, I know not every teacher is skilled in that area. I had a really great conversation with someone recently who they're like, some people just don't have relationship skills, and that falls into teachers too. Like, so when we go to them and they go, you just have to build a relationship with the kid. Because I know some teachers hate hearing that. And you'll see memes in the teacher world all the time, like, oh, just build a relationship, they say. But that is a skill. To build relationships with people is a skill. And not everybody has that skill. I'm sure teachers will come at me for that comment, but but it's the truth. Not everybody has that skill set. And some people become teachers because they really love the content and maybe not always because they love kids. So those are factors to take into place. But I definitely think there is an issue when a teacher gets shot and we're waiting to withhold judgment until we know what the teacher did to deserve having been shot. That's definitely concerning in it itself right there.
Yes. And I think it sums up where we are, what started this whole conversation of accountability on both sides. I mean,
yeah. And stuff like this is definitely not helping. I'd love to get your take on, where do you think education is headed? We have had a major educational shortage crisis of teachers happening right now across the country. And I would even say not even nationwide, but worldwide, this seems to be an issue. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. I feel like every day you're hearing more and more people who are exiting. There are definitely not people lined up at the college universities to become teachers. So what does this mean? Like, what do you think this is going to end up looking like for us?
I mean, like, I have a feeling it's going to flip it on its head to some extent. I mean, and you're right. I've heard of even colleges closing their College of Ed because they don't have new enrollees. Every day teachers are gone and they don't have any subs. I heard yesterday in our school district that there was even 11 buses that didn't have drivers. So, like, I mean, that means these kids aren't going to school. These schools are going down to 4 days because they can't afford to keep their doors open. It's just, I mean, I feel like it's going to crumble. And then hopefully the ones that are going to kind of build it back up and make it strong are ones that truly are passionate and of supporting kids. I feel like we've lost the focus on loving and supporting kids. and just gotten so lost in all of the other things, and with good intentions. But I think, like you were saying earlier, we've tried to band-aid, and we're like, wait, we started band-aiding because of these kiddos, and but we're so far down that it's like we've kind of lost that like focus.
Yeah. And I see special ed too taking a significant hit, because right now there's just the resources aren't there to meet all the needs that are legally need to be met needs. And given everything that's happened since the pandemic, the social emotional needs of kids are out the wazoo. And one of the unfortunate aspects is, in order to really get any type of service or support, most kids have to have either a 504 or an IEP to get anything kind of beyond what is being served in a school setting. And some of these kids have some significant social emotional needs, but they're still kind of hanging on academically, attendance wise. And so they're not being found eligible for supports and services because they're not completely floundering, which that's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother day. But it still just boggles my mind of, when do we finally go, hey, we've got to do something different, because we're not the same since the pandemic has hit us. Education is taking a hard hit, but it seems like everybody still wants to operate as normal. And that goes back to my statement of like, what is it with change in the education system? Because it is the hardest thing to make happen.
It is. I mean, there's so many moving parts. You think about the number of teachers, the number of administrators, the number of children that are served every day. And like you mentioned, the students who are struggling, and it's that wait and see, are they going to fail? Okay, they failed, so now we can officially help them, which just seems so backwards to me, which I love that implemented the MTSS, which is like, we're going to support the in between. But I think sometimes that's not implemented to the like what it was dreamed to be. So like I don't know, but
No. Well, I'm going to get us back on track here. So thank you for humoring me here and going down the rabbit hole of education questions. Like I said, I don't always get a lot of other teachers that I can talk through with this on, so I appreciate it. But I want to get back to Otter, because we're getting close to the end at the end here, and I want to be able to, one, allow you to really, if there's anything you haven't had a chance to say about Otter, what it is, what it's meant for, who would be your best kind of customer of somebody to engage with it, please do so now. And where people can find you, connect with you, can even access. You shared your Etsy shop, but please do it again of how people can get their hands on your tool.
Okay. So pretty much I've had homeschool parents that have used it. I've had parents who are trying to support their students because they see that they're struggling, use it. Teachers, schools. I think it'd be really cool if a school district grabbed it. I'm in the process of having some really neat partnerships coming down. So that just hopefully all of that will work out with an Orton Gillingham company. And I'm on Facebook with Otter Reading. I am on Instagram with Otter Reading, TikTok, but I don't do much on there because I feel really old.
I get it. I totally get it. I feel kind of silly sometimes. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't dance at all.
We'll get together. We'll make a dance. It'll be a dance for education.
I'll be following you like a puppy again.
No, it was me following you. It was.
And I have my Etsy shop, which is Otter Reading, and then slowly getting on Amazon as well. So, but yeah.
I love it. Well, before we go, I have a question for you. It is a question that I ask every guest who comes on the podcast. And the question is, if you could give advice to young adults, youth who are struggling either academically, social, emotionally, or both, what advice would you give?
I would say find somebody who you can connect and be able to open up to, and just know that sometimes is if you're in school, in especially like the middle and high school, sometimes it's just getting out of the education system for you to feel strong and successful. So just look at it as a learning opportunity and understanding who you are as a person, and knowing that this time in education doesn't define who you are.
I love that. I love that. Well, Meagan, thank you so much for coming on the show, for allowing me to ask you all these random questions, for sharing with the audience more about Otter Reading. I truly, truly enjoyed having you today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. No, I'm down for all these. That gets me fired up. I'm very passionate about it, obviously.
I can tell. And that's one of the things that I love about you. So thank you. And thank you to all of my listeners for tuning in. And I will check you out next week on the Neurodiverse Teacher Podcast. Bye, guys. The Neurodiverse Teacher Podcast is an Clemson Education Consulting, LLC